People who got fired for the stupidest reason. What happened? I worked in a customer service call center for an insurance company. A customer called in and had a medical emergency, probably a heart attack. But I'm not sure. While I was on the phone with her, I used the phone in the empty cubicle next to me to call 911 and stayed on both lines to be sure that EMS got to her. I was fired because A, I took too long on calls already and this was exceptionally long. B, I made an unauthorized outgoing call. And C, I gave the customer's personal information, name and address out to the 911 operator. Supposedly, I argued with the owner's wife about working weekends. I specifically told them I can work weekends, but cannot work in a time with less than a day's notice. I'm not at your beck and call for 8 an hour. Duck me right. I was fired up, politely let go, because my manager decided I was lying about having surgery without ever actually talking to me. I let her know 2 weeks in advance and reminded her 5 different times 3 different ways, but the schedule never changed to reflect the time off I needed. I took my 3 days off, and she had another manager call me to ask me where I was on the second day. The manager who called me was horrified to learn that, yes, I had surgery, yes, I was hopped up on pain medication, and yes, main manager knew about this. Main manager was also mad that I had poor performance the week following, which is something I had noted when I told her about the surgery. I needed a week of low impact work as I recovered. 1 week, I noticed I wasn't on the schedule at all and was talking to the manager who'd called me about it. I jokingly wondered if it was because of my surgery. She basically told me she couldn't legally say yes, but I wasn't wrong. Main manager notified me a couple days later. Part of me is mad, but part of me is relieved I'm not in such a toxic place anymore. My first job ever was as a dishwasher. I was so proud. I was 18. Of course, my parents didn't believe me, so my mom called them and asked them if it was true. They fired me that night because they felt I was unreliable. I have yet to let my folks live that one down. My boss asked me to come in his office and fired me on the spot with the excellent reason of you know why. I was pretty distressed and way too shy to protest and left with that. Learned afterwards that was because I had a cold that day and was a bit tired. Joke on him. It's illegal to fire people on the spot in my country, and I brought some well-deserved justice on him. I got fired from Burger King because a coworker let me use his vape on my break. When I was off break, I tried giving it back, but kept getting ignored. I figured I'd give it back after we close, but he left early. I went back the next day, my day off, to return it and got fired for stealing. I got fired from my first ever job as a SIT counselor in training at the summer day camp I went to every year as a kid. I was given the 6-7-year-olds. One of them asked me if I had a girlfriend and girls are gross. Why would you do that sort of way? And I said yes. He asked me if I ever kiss her, and I said yes in a fun horror movie voice manner. He was like, who? Gross. We all had a laugh. I thought it was a fun exchange. Well, I guess the kid went home and told his mom that night, and she freaked out. Demanded I be fired for teaching her child about sex and giving details of my sex life to her child. I was 13. All I said was that I kissed a girl. The camp fired me right there. I had no idea what I said was out of line. I got fired from a McDonald's for asking too many customers how their day was going. Not because it slowed anything down. Mind you, I only did when it was slow. They put in complaints to corporate that I was being invasive. The first time I thought my manager was making a joke. I was a new hire. It was Christmas time, so the office was hosting a Christmas sweater competition. I was appointed judge because I was new and thus impartial. I received explicit consent from each employee in front of the supervisor before proceeding to judge. At least one female co-worker accused me of looking at her chest while I was judging her sweatshirt. I kid you not. Fired. I was fired for playing solitaire on my 15-minute break when I was working as a receptionist. The doctor who owned the clinic was dumb enough to put that as the reason in my termination letter. I collected unemployment after he tried to appeal it. They explained in great detail how stupid of a reason this was for termination. Accepted job and notified them I would need X date off for my sister's wedding 2 months after the start date. Came back from my sister's wedding and shit hit the fan while I was gone. Not my responsibility, but my name was on some of the changes in the document. Canned that day for not being there when they needed me. Got fired once for looking in my supervisor's direction. He walked me right out of the employee entrance, and I walked right back into the personnel office where they asked me why I wasn't working on the line. I was a painter in the paint depot. I told them that I wanted to see the union president, who showed up and immediately sided with the company. I requested a hearing for my unemployment benefits and he declared that I was fired for unjust cause and won along with an extension. Supervisor was interested in a girl in another depot that I was seeing. He also had a wee bit of a power trip going on. I worked that job 4 years and they hired the supervisor off the streets without any experience in paint of any kind. The company folded up a short while later. I got a middle-level position at the company where they boasted at how family-orientated they are. They are the kind of company that has a small arcade and putt-putt and ping pong table and encouraged people to relax and play them. After a month of being there, I decided to play some co-workers in ping pong since I'm pretty decent at it. The owner and his son ends up walking through the doors and sees me playing and challenges me. I play the son and absolutely demolish him. He got extremely upset and walked away after throwing the paddle at me. Later that week I was fired for not fitting the culture. Cool. I was hired as a CNC operator with no prior experience. One guy was supposed to train me on everything I'd need to know. The bits were on spool and the machine would swap them out as needed. In the process of showing me how to clean the machine, he pulled one of the bits off the spool as he was explaining how they're calibrated and so on, and then put it back in the wrong slot. I told him this because I was paying very close attention. He denied it and told me not to try and correct him because I was the one that needed to learn. Well, a few days later that bit broke. He blamed me and basically cornered in a small office to berate me for 20 minutes about how I'd hooked up this expensive part. I had not even run the machine myself yet. He had me doing literally nothing but clean the shop. Then he accused me of stealing the AutoCAD books that he told me take home to study because I hadn't used the program in a few years. So I ended up going home for the books and coming back for a final paycheck that day. I found out later that guy got fired shortly after. The whole reason he was training me was to replace him, and he knew it. He figured if he just kept blaming shit on the new hires, they'd never be able to get rid of him. I worked at a bar that was notorious for firing people. It well known that no one lasted for more than a month, and it was a big deal if you made it longer than that. I made it to month 3 when I was fired for not putting ketchup on a customer's table. They were eating shepherd's pie and salad respectively and didn't even ask for ketchup. During my senior year in high school, I was working at McDonald's. It was right after Christmas and we were really busy. I'd been there 4 hours, had 2 to go, was supposed to get a 30-minute break. Since we'd slowed down, I asked if I could have a break. The shift manager said no one was getting breaks. I said thanks a lot. She told the assistant manager, pretty sure they were sleeping together, that I told her to duck off. He fired me on the spot. Wouldn't even let me give my side of the story. A week later I was working at Jack in the Box. Was a shift manager in 6 months. Did that through a couple years of college. Dropped out, never wanted to go anyway, and moved up to assistant manager, and then a couple years later, general manager. I remembered how shitty I was treated at McDonald's and made sure I treated my employees well. Had the 3rd lowest turnover rate in a 95 restaurant region. Had the 2nd highest average hourly pay and 2 in profit improvement. Take care of your people and they'll do the same for you. I was given my work schedule for the week. It was changed after I received it, and I didn't show up on a day I had originally been off. Manager called and said, "You've done this too many times. You're fired." I'd never so much as been late for work. I learned later that they found a way to get rid of every single person under 18. That's what one place did to me to fire me. Other place had to make new policies for employees to unknowingly break so they could fire them and they'd not be eligible for unemployment. They were eligible. They may not have known, but if they applied, even if the employer contests and says we have such and such policies the employee broke, you're going to get the unemployment if there isn't documentation showing they warned about this policies before the firing. My mom's last employer fired her, then contested the unemployment and even showed up with a bunch of made up mistakes which were bullshit. The unemployment office let the company ramble on for nearly 4 hours. My mom had basically no defense other than she hadn't been written up told anything was wrong, and she got the unemployment. Kinda fired I guess. Got a job offer and they wanted me to start ASAP, but told them I want to give my job at least a week's notice. Turned in a 1-week notice. Later in the day, went to our scheduled breaks 5 minutes late because I was busy doing something at work that I couldn't just put down. So I came back 5 minutes late. Manager came up to me acting really mad and said I was fired for abusing breaks. I just laughed, handed him my badge, and started walking to my car. He tried stopping me saying I needed to see me to fill out paperwork. Laughed even more and got in my car and left. Took the week off to relax before starting my new job. We were short staffed during COVID, then a coworker quit leaving us extra duct. I picked up as many extra shifts as I could, but I was getting burned out, so I told them 60 hours a week was going to be my limit. When I refused to work 16 hours straight one day they fired me. The schedule was hanging off the wall and it was magnetized. Everyone's names were little magnets. Someone knocked it off the wall and thought they'd put the magnets back in the right places. Naturally I didn't show up for my shift. I was fired the next day, even after it came to light what happened, because I should know what my shifts were. Meh. Guy preparing to retire, who had been training me to take over his job for the past 7 months. Felt I was ready to take over completely. Boss was afraid to lose 30+ years of experience and fired me to keep the old guy for a little longer. From what I understand there was a pretty big fight. Old guy was a wonderful reference for me with the new job I obtained, with a 20k pay raise, and begrudgingly agreed to stay on for another year. My boss had one of his temper tantrum and fired me on the spot. Called me later screaming to ask why I wasn't at work. I told him calmly to duck off and went back to work the next week. He acted like nothing happened. Chances are his coked up brain didn't register. That day I actively started looking for another job, but I have to admit I actually worked another year for that freak show. It was messed up, but I had so much fun working at his studio. I worked at this hotel doing afternoon evening shift and 2 overpass shifts a week. They listed the following reasons for letting me go. Claimed I was leaving property without clocking out because I wasn't on camera the entire time. The date they said specifically was an evening that I spent cleaning up the meeting space because it was slow. I was also not the only front desk person on shift. When working overnight I would sit on a chair to do the audit from midnight to 3 AM. Sitting on a chair at the front desk was not allowed, even at midnight early morning. Also when working overnight I had to fold linens, so I would listen to the radio music through a Bluetooth headset while folding and cleaning up the back. That was also not allowed even at midnight early morning. They honestly probably just didn't like me, but after they fired me I went and got a new job at the hotel next door and started making a lot more money and was able to do all the things I was let go for. I started a new job based on the knowledge and transferable skills I had from a previous job. On my first day in the new office another one of the new Irish employees gave me the ominous warning, I don't think you know what you got yourself into. My boss had inherited the department and knew nothing about what we did and couldn't log into the system without help. She said my coworkers who had been there 20 years would train me. Those coworkers refused to train me because they aren't my boss and said to just figure it out as I went along, but then refused to let me work on any projects with them. Then they complained to my boss that I didn't know what I was doing, so I was fired. I had pneumonia and I couldn't even talk, lost voice, so I asked my mom to call my boss to tell her I was severely sick and couldn't come to work. She called me the next day saying I shouldn't rely on my mommy to call in for me when I'm sick, and that I was fired for blowing a shift. I was a hostess at a restaurant and was in grade 10 LOL. Small software company. I was interviewed by the president and the VP, who happened to be his girlfriend. He thought she was working too hard. She didn't want to give up any authority. I was hired as office manager. She didn't communicate with me at all about what I was supposed to do. 2 weeks later he called me into his office, she was there, and said I wasn't doing anything useful, and walked me out of the building. My husband and I worked at the same place. He worked full time in a completely different area and I worked 1 day a week doing something unrelated to what he did. We didn't even see each other on the job besides when we took a break. Anyways, he got laid off because they had to cut his team down. And I got fired because we were married. Did my job great, never had issues, and worked there 4 years. Didn't matter. I even said I understand they had to lay him off, and I wasn't upset he had another job that day that paid double, so it was actually a good thing, but they didn't care and still fired me. Oh, and on top of this I was 3 months pregnant, and we just told them. So not sure if that was a reason to. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.